I'm talking about a renewable grid. How do we get there? Thanks a lot for having me here. We are asking the question, how do we speed up renewable expansion? And if we want to speed up renewable expansion, renewables, we need to understand that we also need to want and have electricity grids. Very briefly, I would like to tell you what Renewables Grid Initiative, RGI in short, is. If there is a slide, yes, there are slides. Very good. It is a collaboration between transmission system operators and NGOs, mainly from Western and Central Europe. Our main objective is to have the grid infrastructure in place that is needed for the energy transition, and we want to promote a fair, transparent, and sustainable grid development. Grids are never beautiful pieces of infrastructure. There is huge public opposition against grids, and very often we local communities are looking for alternatives to grids. But essentially, if we want to have a full decarbonization, reach net zero as soon as possible and not later than 2050, we need to understand what is the role of power lines and how to deploy them in the communities without damaging the economic values of these communities, and of course, protecting nature. Next slide, please. Doesn't come. Okay, it comes. Perfect. So what you see here, it's a scenario that has been published by the NGO community very recently. Is part of a project that we have coordinated, Paris Agreement compliance scenario for net zero. The NGO community is basically putting forward a scenario where net zero is achieved in Europe by 2040. We can argue whether this is possible or not in this time frame. However, it is absolutely important also to stress the fact that 2050 for Europe is too late. And so we will need to find solutions that give full decarbonization in between 2040 and 2050. To do this, the power sector and the grid will play an important role. Next slide, please. What you will see in the next slide, when it comes, is a Sankey diagram produced by Saul Griffith in our lab. It is for the US. Of course, I do not expect you to read what is in there. It's a very big file. But essentially, what this diagram tells you is that you need to electrify everything. If you want to decarbonize fast, you need to give priority to electrification. And if you give priority to electrifications, of course, you need power lines. Next slide, please. I would like to give you, with the next slides, the most important actions that need to take place. In my point of view, we need to focus all our planning efforts into optimizing all resources, including space and nature. I want to stress this because very often we plan energy infrastructure without thinking at the place where this energy infrastructure is going to be deployed. And space in many, many countries, and for sure in Europe, it's very limited, including in the offshore environment. Also, we have very strong nature protection targets in Europe. The biodiversity strategy, which has been recently approved, is a sign that there is a commitment to preserve nature. And so we need to plan together. Optimization of resources is a priority. Electrification comes first. I mentioned this already, and I want to stress this. There is an intrinsic advantage of electrification. There is a clear there is clarity that electrification cannot do all the job on its own. It's not possible to expect electricity to cover all the energy needs of our economies. However, we need to find clear roadmaps for electrification, because by creating electrification roadmaps, we will know exactly what is the infrastructure we need, and also what are the pathways for green gases. It has been already mentioned a couple of times today, the emphasis on hydrogen. Hydrogen, green hydrogen, of course, will play a role. But do not forget how much energy you lose by converting into hydrogen. So optimization has to be the main driver. Of course, we need ambition, long-term targets. Infrastructure, grid infrastructure especially, it's a decadal activity. We plan for the next 10 years. Probably we need to plan for the next 30 years altogether if we want to have the infrastructure in place that we need. So having long-term targets reduces the risk, both from the financial risk, but also the risk of being late. Of course, we need to plan together and plan for the future. Very often we plan for yesterday, because yesterday is the only thing we know. But we need to look into the all possible innovations and come up with new solutions. And in this regard, I would like to mention that the recovery package that has been agreed for Europe is an important instrument. But unfortunately, it is missing an essential part, which is a financial mechanism, which is targeting communities and people. The energy transition cannot be achieved without the support of people. Involving local communities, combining large and small scale is essential, because the energy infrastructure, renewables and grids and all the other things, storage, you name it, is always deployed next to something and next to someone. Next slide, please. And so if you ask me what is the most important innovation that we need to bring, it is actually flexibility. It is flexibility in technologies, flexibility in the regulatory framework, flexibility in the way we plan and deploy infrastructure, flexibility in how we imagine possible pathways. Flexibility is the most important characteristic of the energy system. And so we need to learn to plan it accordingly. And we need to also test new approaches. Of course, next slide. Of course, this can only be done in a collaborative manner. The energy system is more efficient if it is a large system. In Europe, we want to have a European energy system. We do already have a European electricity market, and therefore we need cross borders, but also cross sectors cooperation. Only if we go beyond the silos that is still very dominant in the energy field, we can develop solutions, test them, prove that they work, and then deploy them at scale. What we learn by working cross sectors and cross borders together with a variety of stakeholders is fundamental to really reinvent the system that is fit for the future. And my next slide, I think, is the last one. Yes, indeed. And so I thank you, and I look forward to the discussion later.